October the 30th of 2021, Leilani Marie Beauchamp left in the company of 21-year-old Juan Para Peralta. The latter was an airman stationed at Travis Air Force Base in California and rented a home in Fairfield with fellow airman Damian Ponders. Para Peralta had previously been involved in a relationship with a young woman named Jessica Quintanilla. She was jealous of 19-year-old Beauchamp and had reportedly told her ex-boyfriend not to hang around with her or post anything about her on social media. On October the 30th, Quintanilla, who was at the time in her mid-20s, went to retrieve some personal belongings from the Fairfield home, unaware that Beauchamp would be there. An argument ensued when she discovered the teen in bed with Para Peralta. As tensions escalated, Quintanilla was reported to have brandished a Glock. The weapon was discharged and a single bullet went through Beauchamp's head, killing her. The young woman's body was then wrapped in a blanket, taken to a rural road near Salinas, and dumped into vegetation on the side of a hill. Beauchamp was reported missing in the incident's wake, and the authorities rapidly uncovered the murder scene at the Fairfield home. Para Peralta and Ponders were offered immunity in exchange for their testimony. The former revealed that after shooting Beauchamp, Quintanilla held him at gunpoint and forced him to help dispose of the body more than 130 miles away from the crime scene. She told me she would kill me if I said anything, the man told detectives. On November the 1st of 2021, Para Peralta led law enforcement to the spot where he'd dumped Beauchamp's body. He and Ponders were later discharged from the Air Force under less than honorable conditions. Also involved in the failed cover-up was Quintanilla's brother, Marco, who at the time was on parole after serving a sentence for attempted murder in an unrelated incident. At some point during the cover-up, Quintanilla had reportedly turned to her brother and said, "We killed someone." During the trial that followed, the young woman's defense described the shooting as a tragic accident, claiming it was the quintessential heat of passion action. The prosecution, however, argued that Quintanilla was of clear mind when she gunned down her love rival while the victim was in bed, naked and vulnerable. The argument prevailed that Quintanilla had acted out of jealousy to shoot Beauchamp while she was unarmed and non-threatening. In November of 2024, she was found guilty of murder and her brother of being an accessory after the fact. In January of the following year, she was sentenced to 25 years to life, while Marco was handed a 4-year sentence. Number 8. Kyle Morley. On the night of February the 24th of 2023, Kyle Morley was out drinking with his friend David Bettison and other companions in Hugglescote, Leicestershire, England. At around midnight, Morley's ex-girlfriend, 23-year-old Katie Lamb, arrived in Hugglescote. The young woman and Morley, who was at the time in his late 20s, became involved in an argument. They had been together for 2.5 years before ending things in December of the previous year. The relationship, as described by Lamb's mother, had been toxic and volatile. In the hour that followed Lamb's arrival, CCTV from the area showed her, Morley and Bettison moving between the gate in and the playground at Hugglescote Park. At around 1:45 a.m., Lamb and 43-year-old Bettison were captured heading into the park hand in hand. Minutes later, Morley walked through the park while on his way home. He came upon Lamb and Bettison as they were engaged in a consensual, intimate act on the playground. Morley, who was drunk and high on cocaine, charged them both. He punched Lamb in the face and the strike knocked her out. He then turned his aggression towards Bettison, who reportedly still had his pants down. Morley punched the man, and after he collapsed, he relentlessly kicked and stomped him, bashing his head in. Bettison, who made no attempt to fight back, suffered devastating injuries. Lamb regained her senses and began screaming, prompting residents to alert Leicestershire police. First responders were at the scene at around 2:15 a.m. Bettison's face was covered in blood, and the damage he'd sustained was so severe that officers were unable to give him first aid. His facial injuries left him unable to breathe, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The police tried to talk to Lamb, but Morley's punch had rendered her incoherent. She later remembered seeing her ex hitting Bettison and the latter making rattling noises, which she said made her think he was going to die due to her experience working in a nursing home. At first, Morley told the police that he'd attacked Bettison because he believed he was forcing himself on his ex-girlfriend. That statement was determined to have been a lie, and he changed his story, but nevertheless tried to maintain a level of innocence. During the legal proceedings that followed, he pleaded guilty to causing grievous bodily harm to Lamb. He denied murder in Bettison's case, and hoping for a manslaughter verdict, claimed that he'd lost control while intoxicated and that he hadn't meant to kill him. Prosecutor Michael Brady, KC, told the court that the drink and drugs were no excuse, adding that Morley had acted out of jealous rage upon seeing his friend and his ex engaged in intimate relations. The only inference to draw such was the savagery of the attack is that the defendant intended to kill Mr. Bettison. Brady said the jury agreed and found him guilty of murder. Judge Timothy Spencer, KC, said that the attack was as ferocious as it was merciless and jailed Morley for life with a minimum of 18 years and 6 months behind bars. Number 7. Dayane Rafaella de Silva Rodrigues. On February the 18th of 2021, surveillance cameras from a bar in Tianguá, Brazil, captured Dayane Rafaella de Silva Rodrigues arriving outside the establishment on the back of a motorcycle. The rider's connection to Rodrigues was unclear. He remained outside while the woman stormed into the building and approached the table where her husband was sitting with 5 people, one of whom was 26-year-old Dayane Batista Barros. As seen in CCTV footage, Rodrigues brandished a pistol and without warning or provocation fired at the table multiple times. The men dispersed, but one of the bullets struck Barros in the head, killing her on the spot. A 24-year-old man was hit in the arm, but he recovered after receiving surgery. In the moments that followed the shooting, Rodrigues was recorded grappling with her husband over control of the weapon outside the bar. The man who'd taken her to the scene on his motorcycle rode off upon seeing the altercation. It was unclear from the footage if Rodrigues' husband was able to disarm her, but the woman was recorded walking away from the scene with her handbag. Local police went to her home and took her into custody shortly thereafter. It was initially suspected that she specifically targeted the younger woman out of jealousy. Rodrigues had indeed acted out of jealous rage, but not towards the victim, whom she claimed that she didn't know. According to her police statements, Rodrigues and her husband had argued in the past about him going to bars which were known to be frequented by escorts. Rodrigues, who had no prior criminal record, told the authorities that she was angry with him and randomly fired at the table. As of the latest information available on the case, she was being investigated for homicide and bodily injury. Number 6. Michael Carpenter.
Mr. Carpenter, do you wish to say anything before sentencing today?
I agree that she was a really amazing person. She was really nice and very caring. She was someone who would listen to you if you had something going on. She was always concerned and caring, and always appreciate that about her. Like they said, there's no real words that can cover something like that, like losing someone like that.
In October of 2022, Michael Carpenter and 28-year-old Nicole Hammond both worked at Dubois Textile in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Their colleagues recounted that Carpenter made repeated advances towards Hammond and was rebuffed. According to their boss, the situation was never reported to upper management and the company had no indication that there was anything awry. Carpenter's initial infatuation turned to obsession, which further devolved into jealous rage. On the night of October the 23rd, he and Hammond argued over text, with the focus being on his advances and unwanted overtures. The woman said that she did not want to be touched or manipulated by him. The following morning, as Hammond went into work, she was approached by Carpenter. He brandished a 9mm pistol and shot her once through the neck, killing her. Carpenter left the woman to die in the parking lot and fled, but was arrested on murder charges a few hours later. He went to trial in the summer of 2024. And after only 2 weeks, he was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree intentional murder.
Michael Jordan Carpenter, you were found guilty by a jury of committing the offense of murder in the first degree, premeditated, in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.185, Subdivision A1.
Carpenter smiled as he entered the courtroom for his sentencing in September. After hearing victim impact statements from the victim's loved ones, Carpenter also spoke about Hammond. He described her as an amazing person, but offered no apology and expressed no remorse for his actions. Carpenter again smiled when the Benton County judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hammond's mother subsequently told a media outlet, "He smirked so much it's like now I want him behind the walls. I just want him to pay for what he did to her." Number 5. Cordelia Farrell. Englishman Wayne Coventry called Worcestershire police on September the 11th of 2019 while he was actively being attacked by his girlfriend, Cordelia Farrell. Body cam footage from responding officers showed Coventry bleeding from his face and back, while also exhibiting injuries to his privates. During the course of the attack, Farrell was reported to have grabbed the man by his genitals with both her hands. She held them in a vice-like grip and dragged him around their apartment, causing him immense pain and swelling. Farrell also bit into her boyfriend's genitals and manhood, in addition to stabbing him in the back with a piece of broken crockery. The relationship was, by all accounts, toxic and violent, with most of their rows being born out of jealousy. Farrell's attack, fueled by drugs and alcohol, reportedly began with the woman trying to wind up Coventry by watching YouTube music videos featuring her ex-boyfriend. He in turn reacted by saying that he cheated on her, which was believed to have been a lie meant to get a rise out of her. His words resulted in Farrell attacking his groin area with extreme brutality. When officers arrived at the scene, she reportedly told one of them, "It's getting worse and worse, and one of us is going to end up dead." On October the 14th, Farrell and Coventry were both at the Bromsgrove home of the latter's brother when another argument erupted between them. As tensions escalated, Farrell grabbed a large blade from a kitchen knife block. When Coventry turned to face her, the woman raised the knife up high and plunged it deep into his chest. The blade went nearly half an inch into the father of three's body and straight into his aorta. 3 people witnessed the stabbing, with one of them subsequently telling the police that Farrell smiled as she pulled the knife out and grinned, as if she was pleased in what she had done. 36-year-old Coventry collapsed and died within minutes. Farrell fled the scene, resulting in a major manhunt, before she ultimately surrendered to law enforcement on October the 19th. At the end of a 2-week trial that took place in the fall of 2020, Farrell was cleared of murder and found guilty of manslaughter. The jury's verdict was unanimous. Judge James Burbidge told the woman it was the dynamic of your relationship that led to this. Burbidge added, "People close to you and him realized it was a toxic relationship, likely to end in a catastrophe," and it did. Farrell was jailed for 10 years, with a concurrent sentence of 18 months for her previous assault on Coventry. Number 4. Donna Perry. During a 4-month period in 1993, escorts were shot dead and dumped on the banks of the Spokane River in the state of Washington. The victims, whose bodies were naked or partially exposed, were identified as 26-year-old Yolanda Sapp, along with Nikki Lowe and Kathy Brisbois, aged 34 and 38, respectively. Their remains were successfully discovered in February, March, and May. The murdered escorts were initially believed to have been additional victims claimed by serial killer Robert Lee Yates, who was active in Spokane from 1975 to 1998. In March of 2012, transgender woman Donna Perry was convicted of firearms possession, and as a result, her DNA was submitted to the national database. Donna, who was born Douglas Perry, had gender affirmation surgery in Thailand in 2000. According to the 2012 affidavit, she told the police that she'd undergone the surgery as a permanent way to control violence. Perry's criminal record stretched back to the mid-1970s. It included an arrest in 1988 for the possession of a pipe bomb, with the ensuing investigation revealing that Perry had 49 guns and 20,000 rounds of ammunition. Prior to transitioning, Perry was known to often solicit the services of escorts. In the late 1990s, Perry served 18 months behind bars after being pulled over in Oregon's red light district with a gun and a knife. A cellmate of Perry's during that stint would tell the police that the latter had confessed to killing 9 escorts. The motive, according to the report, was jealousy. Perry claimed to have carried out the killings because she couldn't breed and the women had the ability to have children and they were wasting it, being pond scum. Following her 2012 conviction and the introduction of her DNA into the database, Perry was tied to the killing of Sapp, Lowe, and Brisbois. In 2014, she was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. According to an affidavit, Perry once again spoke of her transition to female as a way of ending a cycle of violence, telling investigators, "Douglas didn't stop, Donna stopped it." Perry added, "I'm not going to admit I killed anybody. I didn't. Donna has killed nobody." When asked if Douglas had killed the escorts, Perry reportedly replied, "I don't know if Doug did or not. It was 20 years ago, and I have no idea whether he did or did not." Perry's gender identity would prove a significant aspect during the legal proceedings that followed. Part of her defense followed the tune of her police statements that it was Douglas Perry, not Donna, who may have committed the killings. Aside from presenting DNA and fingerprint evidence, the prosecution argued that Perry underwent gender-affirming surgery in order to avoid suspicion that she was a serial killer. A number of experts voiced their opinion on the highly publicized case, with a particular focus on Donna stating that Douglas was responsible for the killings. Homicide detective Brian Harris said during a documentary on the case, "In the eyes of the law, it doesn't matter what the genitalia says. What matters in this case is what the DNA says." Harris added, "Donna Perry, Douglas Perry, they're one and the same. They are the killers." Jack Halberstam, a transgender professor of American and Gender Studies at the University of Southern California, told the police that transitioning did not absolve the responsibility of killing 3 women, highlighting that as a legal defense putting away the science, it's absolute nonsense. Crime expert Brian Frederick expressed a belief that Perry was driven by jealousy while also explaining why the killer targeted escorts. Frederick noted he picked some attractive victims, perhaps more attractive than he could ever plan to be as Donna. The criminologist proposed that Perry may have felt that they were squandering this beauty by selling their bodies. At the end of her trial in the summer of 2017, Perry was handed 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The victims' families embraced and cried in the court hallway as resolution had been brought to the case. Roughly 27 years since the killings had occurred. Number 3. Rafal Winiarski. On August the 1st of 2021, English law enforcement was called to a home in Lake Close in Shipdham, Norfolk, where Rafal Winiarski lived with his wife, 37-year-old Małgorzata Lekanska. A neighbor had raised the alarm after they heard screams and shouts coming from the residence. When officers arrived at the address, they found Winiarski and Lekanska's young daughter outside. She was distraught but unharmed. When officers entered the home, they came upon Winiarski watching TV while sitting on the couch. In the living room, Lekanska was on the kitchen floor, unresponsive, after she'd been savagely attacked by her husband. An axe that had been used during the onslaught was found at the scene, close to the victim's body. Lekanska, who was pronounced dead shortly thereafter, exhibited 17 separate wounds, including skull fractures consistent with being chopped with an axe. Winiarski had also used a knife to deal strikes on his wife with such force that the blade's tip broke. The attack unfolded minutes after Lekanska had returned from a shopping trip, and while their young daughter played in the garden. After butchering his wife, Winiarski changed out of his bloodied clothes and sat down to watch TV. The couple, who were originally from Poland, had moved to the UK with their daughters in 2014. Their older daughter, who was at work at the time of her mother's killing, reported that Winiarski had been mentally unstable for years and was reluctant to get help. His mental health was further deteriorated by the use of drugs and alcohol. He'd developed the obsession that his wife was having affairs. The man installed hidden cameras in their home and nailed the windows shut. In his talks with investigators, Winiarski claimed that he didn't mean to kill his wife, but that he'd become angry after suspecting that she'd posted bad things about him online. His defense argued that he was substantially impaired by his mental health issues and that he was morbidly jealous. A mental health expert for the prosecution argued that Winiarski was most likely suffering from paranoid psychosis and delusions of jealousy relating to his wife. He denied murder and was set to go to trial, but eventually admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility and loss of control. Winiarski's plea was accepted by Norwich Crown Court prosecutors, and in May of 2024 he was jailed for a minimum of 21 years. Today's topic was requested by River Parish. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Phuong Ratha. In February of 2022, Cambodian man Phuong Ratha and his wife Lai Srey Nuch moved to Phnom Penh to start a new life with their young son. In the months that followed, the couple's home life in the country's capital became tumultuous. Based on reports from their neighbors, they described Ratha as violent, abusive and very jealous, detailing that they often heard him shouting at Lai and accusing her of talking to other men on her phone. After one such row on a May evening in 2022, concerned neighbors went to the couple's home to check on Lai. As they made their way into the residence, they found her headless body in a pool of blood on the white tile floor. Local authorities launched a manhunt for Ratha, and the following day they found him in his hometown in Takeo province. The man had fled roughly 60 miles away from the crime scene. Photos of the arrest showed law enforcement taking hold of a shirtless Ratha. He admitted to killing Lai, telling officers, "I was jealous because I felt like my wife was acting differently. I didn't beat her before I killed her. I used a white knife to cut her throat." Ratha then decapitated Lai with a large meat cleaver and stuffed her head in a white sack. He rode away from their home on his motorcycle and dumped the sack in a nearby wasteland. His reason for doing so remained unclear, but it was suspected to have been a misguided attempt at concealing evidence. In December of 2022, Ratha was sentenced to life imprisonment. Number 1. Ertan Ersoy. On June the 1st of 2022, Ertan Ersoy alerted the emergency services and went out in the street calling for help after he stabbed his wife at the home they shared in Colchester, Essex, England. The victim, Dr. Antonella Castelveda, was found dead on the kitchen floor. She exhibited over a dozen knife wounds to her face, neck, upper chest, and to both hands. 52-year-old Castelveda was a lecturer at the University of Suffolk who led an MA course in English and creative writing. Leading up to the incident, Ersoy, who was also a lecturer and a teaching fellow, had become convinced that his wife was cheating on him. It led to frequent arguments and him planting a listening device in their home. Then on June the 1st, he confronted Castelveda in the kitchen and an argument ensued. In the moments that followed, Ersoy launched a frenzied knife attack, killing his wife. Following his arrest, the man denied murder and pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming he'd suffered an abnormality of mental functioning at the time. Ersoy said that it substantially affected his judgment and self-control. Experts described his mental health as mild to moderate depression, and the jury felt that it didn't contextualize his actions to the extent that a manslaughter conviction was justified. Recounting the murder circumstances, a judge at Chelmsford Crown Court told Ersoy she was no threat to you when you ended her life in the most brutal fashion by cutting her throat. One of the detectives involved in the investigation described Ersoy as a clever, manipulative, and calculated man. He was found guilty of murder, and in the fall of 2023, he was jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be insanely jealous or uncontrollably generous? Let us know in the comments section below.